Greetings. In this week's Future Trends Forum recording, we took a deep dive into neurodiversity, not among students in higher education, but among faculty and staff. Our two guests have put together a new book which has a lot of vital insights into this topic, as well as a lot of stories by people who are neurodiverse, describing their experience in colleges and universities. I think this is a great topic, one that's going to be of major interest going forward. Please enjoy, and as always, leave any comments in the comment section below. Well, speaking of being glad to hear it, I'm glad to see all of you. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Future Trends Forum. I'm really glad to see all of you here today. We have two fantastic guests who are talking about a fantastically important book and subject, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation. Their topic is one that's of great importance to higher education. It's one that we sometimes have a hard time talking about. We're talking about neurodivergence. And so far, in my experience, we've had a building amount of concern about neurodivergent students. So there have been interesting developments on how do you shape pedagogy, how do you change student support. I've seen this as well in architecture. How do you design buildings of all kinds, from classrooms to residence halls for neurodivergent learners? But what I haven't seen a lot of yet is examinations of neurodivergence among faculty and staff, which is where this new book comes in, I think, just perfectly right now. And we have two of the editors, contributors, authors, organizers of them, and I'd like to invite them up to speak first. If we could get Rebecca Pope-Ruark. Rebecca, hello, and welcome to the forum. I should say welcome back. Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Well, a pleasure. I don't know if you recall this from last time, but we have a tradition of introducing people, not by talking about what they've done in the past, but what they're planning on doing for the next year. So I'm curious, what are the big projects and what are the big ideas for you looking ahead for the next 12 months?
Yeah, I think we're going to continue to support this book as it just came out. So we're going to be hopefully zooming into some book groups and things around the country. We've got a welcome event in September for this book that we're going to kind of a reading group that Lee and I can talk about a little bit more. So we're going to be working on that. I just finished another book on burnout and women leaders in higher education. So we'll be working through that process over the next year and hopefully have that out in the fall. Fingers crossed, Greg. and working on my podcast too. So working on the Agile Academic podcast, having some fun with that again.
Oh, excellent. And if someone in the chat can throw in a link to that podcast, that would be great. I just put in a reference to the book, which has the wonderful title Of Many Minds. Well, before I ask about that, Rebecca, I gather that you're in Atlanta right now, so we have the East Coast pretty well represented. Well, speaking of the East Coast, let me get your co-conspirator up on stage. Lee Skallerup Bessette. Hello, my friend and colleague. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Oh, I'm great now.
From just across the river.
I think so. Now,
Yeah.
shouldn't we be seeing a dog or three coming up?
Do we have no? Paula went upstairs and Ziggy is not doing so great, but he's hanging in there.
Oh,
so yeah, we have an elderly rescue. And when I mean elderly, he's anywhere between 16 and 20 years old.
Oh my gosh.
So yeah, it's but you know, he sleeps, he still gets to sleep the day away. We like hand feed him. And our our increasingly gigantic 1-year-old Labrador keeps him company. So
oh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
I mean, increasingly gigantic Labradors sounds like the title of a novel.
Yeah. Yeah, you know how like the whole story of Clifford, the big red dog, where they got him as a puppy and they're like, oh, isn't he adorable? And then he was 12 feet tall.
That's
Like, not quite like that, but he was supposed to, Apollo was supposed to be he was the smallest of his litter, like noticeably, and has now grown into the biggest one out of that entire litter. So yeah, no, he's really big, but he's a good boy. He's doing really good. He's a really good boy.
I know all your dogs are surrounded with love and care.
Yeah. So that's their.
Well, Leah, I'm going to ask you this question. I think I already know the answer. The reason friends is because Lee and I are colleagues here at Georgetown University. So I holler into my classes to do great presentations all the time. But again, the question is, what are you going to be working on for the next year? I mean, thinking about WordPress and what comes next.
Yeah.
What else are you thinking about and doing?
Oh, what am I not thinking about? This is the ADHD brain. I'm still really interested in the implications of minimal computing and what does it mean to go small. And so I have all of these books that I'm impulsively buying around small data and digital degrowth and um alternative networks and all of that kind of stuff. And they're sitting there taunting me and they're like, I'm going to do
Mm,
something with them eventually or
mm,
not. I don't know. uh we'll see where my brain takes it. And and I'm still really interested in these in talking about neurodivergence and neurodiversity within higher education. um and just, yeah, I don't have a really new thing yet that I've like latched on to. So I'm still sort of waiting for that inspiration to hit. So I'm still at the spaghetti mode, which is my kind of way of it is I start a lot of projects and then one of them finally sticks. And so I haven't found the one yet that's sticking. I haven't found that hook yet, the stickiness
mm.
that makes my brain go, "Oh, we're going to hyper focus on this now for the next 12 to 18 months."
Well, a sticky hook to the brain sounds pretty painful, but I hope you get a good one. Uh, and I appreciate like good people everywhere you're writing. Uh, and Rebecca and Lee, thank you for giving us that forward-looking view. Let me just begin. And friends, if you're new to the forum, I'm going to ask our guests a couple of questions to give them a chance to cut loose and talk about their work. But then after that's going to be over to you. So please think about what questions you would like to put to our guests, what comments, what ideas you'd like them to respond to. And I guess for me, if I can ask a very practical question right off the bat, which is what are what are some of the best ways that colleges and universities can best support neurodivergent faculty and staff? And that's so different from supporting, I think, in many ways, neurodivergent students. What are some of the strategies that you'd recommend?
Lee, you want to take that one first?
Oh, you see that immediately this happened. No,
Yeah.
you do it. No, you do it.
Well, and I think I don't know if there's anyone who's really doing it very well yet. I mean, that's what the kind of message of all of the stories in our book say, is that no one's really doing it well. And where were we? We were talking someplace, I don't remember where I would love to edit a book about success stories, featuring universities and colleges and workplaces that are getting it right. Are they out there?
Mhm.
I don't know. I hope they are. I'll edit the book because I'm a serial book editor now. But I mean, I think the first thing is to just, to to listen. I don't know if there's anything. I have a problem with like thinking about it in terms of institutions themselves and
Mhm.
doing it in terms of policy or procedure or all of that kind of stuff. Is that and again, there's evidence in the books where the procedures that were supposedly there to help neurodiverse faculty and staff actually did the exact opposite. Right. The latest podcast that we did with Shannon was an example of that. And so I think it has less to do with the institutions, but the people within them. Right. And that is to listen, and really listen, and to be empathetic to that. And the thing that I said was, if what somebody is saying to you or what you're reading in the book makes you uncomfortable, gets your back up, gets your like saying, well, that's not fair, or this or that, take the time to unpack that and to not put that again work onto your colleague. And I think a lot of the times it is, and this is goes for disabilities, and any sort of difference writ large, is that the person with the difference is the problem. And I think we really need to shift that thinking. And hopefully we can do that more on an individual or a small unit level, that which would eventually trickle up to larger institutional change.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. Rebecca, did you want to build on that?
I was going to add to that too, and I think it's two things for me are the building community piece. So building spaces where people can be in community, so that difference is reduced and we understand each other better. And I think it's also, and Lee will talk about this as well, like just recognizing the ableism that underlies most of the system, right? And having a better sense of what that feels like and what that looks like, which was really the goal of the stories, right? It's a very narrative-based book. And the hope is that you find someone you connect with, or you see a colleague in one of the stories, and you can have conversations about how do we support each other, or how do we recognize the ableism that kind of underlies a lot of what we do in our general functions during day to day at the institution.
So important in general for so many purposes, including visible physical disabilities. Well, in the chat, people have chimed in with you, lots and lots of requests to listen, to make space for people, comments about ways of trying to make other people feel safe, and also to build community, which is really important. June Claes said this is a new thing for administrations to think about, which is very important. Peter Shea points out that some corporations have already been thinking about this, so we need to catch up. Dana Longley suggests a repository of best practices would be fantastic, since, and I'm reading from her, so many in admin are clueless about issues, let alone possible supports. Elizabeth gave a really nice initial best practice, actually. She says, for staff, we're emphasizing shorter meetings with agendas ahead of time and notes afterwards. I know this is hugely helpful to my ADHD-ness. Elizabeth, I'd wonder if that would be an example of the curb cut principle, when you make an accommodation or a strategy for a disability of some kind that benefits everyone.
Absolutely. And the one thing I didn't mention there that I'm adding in the chat is providing a gap in between those meetings to give people a chance to process. That is something that benefits all of us, especially when you're going from meeting to classroom to meeting to meeting to classroom. Now, obviously, the biggest challenge with that is getting it to be adopted across the board. So we are doing some modeling of it, and we are hoping that we will see further adoption. I work a great deal with learning disabled students. I'm learning disabled myself. I was recently diagnosed as ADHD after 50 years of no one being surprised by this diagnosis whatsoever. So we're really looking to see how we can make things more approachable for everyone.
Well, Elizabeth, where are you? You said we. Who's the we?
University of Central Florida. We haven't talked in a really long time, Brian. Not since our ELD days.
Well,
so
UCF does incredible stuff. Has been very impressive, and you do incredible stuff at scale. So it's in general, it's good to hear from your institution, but always good to hear from you, Elizabeth.
Thank you. Yep, Division of Digital Learning. We are trying to model what we want to see in our classrooms.
Very good, very good. I'm trying to keep it with the chat, but it's just on fire. People are just having all kinds of good thoughts. Let me ask a follow-up question, though, if I could, just to press us a little further, Rebecca and Lee. What are some of the ways then that individual academics, and by academics I mean the whole community, students, faculty, staff, how can we reach out to other academics, faculty, and staff? I mean, should we, since these are often invisible disabilities, is there a way of making space, of saying, hey, in this meeting, we'd love to hear from people who have or characterized or have received a diagnosis of neurodivergence? Or is there some other way we can do this from the bottom up?
I mean, I think it's kind of a UDL issue, right? So you create the space for everyone and you create the psychological safety for everyone to have those conversations. You don't want to create spaces where you're calling someone out and saying, please identify yourself now, right? So we want to make sure that we're building cultures that are psychologically safe for people to be vulnerable in those situations and express themselves authentically.
Then UDL, Universal Design for Learning, right?
Mhm.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. I have more questions, but the audience is, as usual, way ahead of me. And so I want to turn things over to for other people to ask questions. And there's one that comes in from Catherine Myers, who asks, do you think that people are more sensitive to students that are neurodivergent because they are students, whereas with staff and faculty, there are higher expectations for them? Meaning that it needs to be remembered that just because people are out of school or college doesn't mean these issues don't just disappear.
This is the professionalism issue.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Can you say more about that? The
Yeah.
professionalism issue?
Lee?
So so I sort of have two. I have the kind of really crass the blame neoliberalism answer, which is students are paying customers, faculty and staff are an expense. Right?
Yes.
And so even if individuals are perhaps more empathetic to students, the whole system is set up to have more empathy for the students because we want to keep them happy, to keep paying tuition, to keep coming to graduation rates, to funding, to become alumni and have good feelings about the institution, et cetera, right? Whereas any faculty and staff were an expense,
Yeah.
right? But
Right.
then but there's another aspect to that too, which is something that I really get to in the afterwards, which I just called the coda because I like that.
Mhm.
Is this idea of professionalism, right? Is that we don't expect students to necessarily be professional. We are helping them through that process. We understand that there's going to be neurodivergence or not, oftentimes the messiness of your late teens, early 20s. Like there is a cultural expectation of what a student is, for better or worse, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
But there is also an expectation then on how faculty and staff are supposed to behave. And very often, it is couched in professionalism. That was unprofessional,
Mhm.
right? Katie Rose Prial, who wrote the foreword to the book, just
Mhm.
shared something on social media, and it's a story she's told many times about, and she's been diagnosed as autistic later on, and she talks about that in her foreword, is very open about it. Also great person writing about mental health and higher education. But she
Mhm.
said how she went up for her first year review, and she heard that somebody had anonymously said that she was rude
Mhm.
because she walked past somebody's office door that was open and didn't stop to say hello, right? And then that was rude and unprofessional. And so there are all of these kinds of, and especially for neurodiverse people, we have I have trouble with hierarchy. Sometimes it's social cues. Sometimes it's all of these small things that then turn into, well, that's just unprofessional,
Mhm.
right? It's unprofessional for me to talk as loudly as I do and to talk as much as I do with my hands. It is
Mhm.
unprofessional not to make eye contact. It is unprofessional, not to come to the events after work. And I, there is a story that is going to stick with me in the book about a faculty member who was denied promotion because they didn't socialize outside of work,
Ah.
and therefore were seen as not valuing the community, right, and not participating in those professional norms. So again, we can say, oh, we're open to neurodiverse folks, we're open to all kinds of difference, but at the end of the day, it's like, well, it's not because they have X or Y, it's because they're unprofessional, right? And those are the kinds of things that we need to unpack. And I think it is, we are willing to extend more grace to students,
Mhm.
than we are to faculty and staff. And then there's the whole life of the mind thing. And, you know, we're just supposed to be these brilliant brains that do brilliant brainy things.
Mhm.
And when our brilliant brains aren't braining the right way, then, you know, we don't know what to do with that. We just don't know what to do with the brilliant brains that don't brain the right way.
That's really well said. Thank you both, Lee and Rebecca, and thank you very much, Catherine, for that really great question. We have a whole bunch of comments that have come in as both of you were speaking. Karen Belnier points to a website from Northeastern University, and Lisa McAfee points to a Neurodiversity connection group on the second Friday of each month from 1 to 2 p.m. PST. Jim Luke offers the really interesting observation that corporations tend to realize neurodivergence is covered by ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and has legal issues, i.e. they can be sued. College admins, in contrast, widely still just don't with regard to faculty and staff. So those are some very, very important points. Lee, you mentioned the story of the professor who didn't get promoted. Our Canadian, our Quebecois friend Mathieu Plourde has another one like this. Ableism is much in play for the publish or perish culture of the tenure track. I'm sure we lose a bunch of terrific professors through that process. We have a question from Tony Sindelar, or it's a comment, but I think it's really a question. He writes this: something that I'm very sensitive to is the working space we give higher staff. Most institutions are resource constrained and have staff working in physical environments that are going to be hard for anybody to be happy and productive. Annie Belanger, Annie, I hope I didn't mangle your name too badly, adds this note: even small things can be done to provide peripheral visual privacy and shading in cubicles. I guess, do either of you, Rebecca or Lee, would you like to add something about space design, both physical, architectural design, but also how we handle physical space socially?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And as the daughter of an architect
Oh,
who's kind of,
wow.
yeah, steeped in that growing up. But, you know, I think there are part of it is like if you assign the space, allow the person to personalize that space how they need to be comfortable, right? So how can you personalize it for temperature? How can you personalize it for lighting, right? What works for different people, and allowing people to create those spaces and stay in those spaces once they get comfortable, right? Forcing people to move around a lot can cause some unnecessary traumas if you've gotten into a situation or a physical space where you are comfortable and you've got it set to what makes you most functional and happy. I think that's, you know, I think we need to be reasonable with the accommodations that we allow people to make in those spaces for these reasons.
Interesting. Thank you. Lee, did you want to add anything to that?
I mean, I think that there's, you know, the spaces in which we teach and in which we work often are very much, again, afterthoughts at institutions, right? Even the classrooms themselves, you know, does anybody remember the Classrooms of Shame Tumblr that was out there? It was just like these horrid classrooms, like they'd take a picture and it's like, here's the roof leaking, right? Here's the bucket in the middle of our classroom because you know, no one will fix it. Here's the like raw wires that allow, you know, here's an electrical outlet that doesn't have 3 prongs. And so therefore, you know, I just think generally space is an issue for neurodivergent and also just regular faculty and staff. Whereas you're right, no one would be happy in those. And so I think it is working together to make the best out of a bad situation. And sort of negotiating then what can we do with the space we have. I don't remember, but there's, you know, like if there's a light that's buzzing or flickering, right? Is it possible that we get some desk lamps instead so we can keep the ceiling halogens or you know, fluorescents off? You know, is it space heaters? Is it fans? Is it, you know, and so just being able to negotiate, like, again, you know, you don't have to be neurodiverse to get driven absolutely crazy by a flickering light. or
Sure,
or the
sure.
loud buzz, or a lack of natural light, right? I'm sitting here in my basement right now in the dark.
Yeah.
So it doesn't bother me, but
I'm
you
in
know,
an enclosed interior room right now.
yeah, enclosed interior room and car barn. So yeah, so I think, like, again, being able to have those conversations with the people that you work with in your unit, who are probably also very constrained by whatever it is as well, and just be able to have a conversation around, like, how do we, how do we navigate the space that we have been given, in order to, like, maximize productivity, but keep everybody at least sort of happy.
Very good. And I'll just throw in, and we can come back to this if you want, that so many campuses are facing so many financial stresses that working on maintenance can be very difficult.
Yeah.
We have just a whole bunch of comments have been coming in. Lee, Rebecca, you've clearly struck a chord with this audience. Lots and lots of people who are praising what you said about professionalism, about socializing. Jennifer Culver chimes in, and Jennifer, if you feel up for talking with us, we'd love to hear more. She says this: I'm a senior director of accessibility, yes, and taught a session on designing for all learners, specifically about neurodivergent learners. But so many faculty wrote me saying they felt seen, and it was so empowering for them.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer, I think you're on the same page as our guests. Just detecting this rising tide that we need to act on. Bravo for that work.
Thank you. And they did feel very seen, but they also left saying they felt empowered because nobody talks about this. And so when I started the session showing the statistics in aggregate of our students, I'm at a community college, a Dallas college, so it's a bunch of community colleges that have merged together into one. When I showed the statistics of our learners who have more of these kinds of diagnoses than other kinds, and then showing as well in aggregate form the amount of the types of accommodations, in comparison, nobody had really gotten into the weeds with them about how to help these learners, and how they can even help each other. And in some of them left saying, now I have tools to better organize myself. So it was a really great session. We had like 180 people online.
Whoa, that's great.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, Jennifer, so far I want to make sure you're connected to Lee and Rebecca and vice versa. But also, I wonder, this isn't a real question. I want to get to someone with a better question, but I'm wondering if down the road a bit, we might not see Jennifer's job redefined. So you're the director of accessibility for everybody on campus, or if you might see more positions like that. But here's a much better question. This is from Dana Longley, and she asks this: could you perhaps talk about stereotypes, for example, in popular culture, and the role they can play in ableism and the creation of uncomfortable or even hostile work environments for neurodiverse professionals?
Yeah. We could.
Yeah.
Well, why don't you then, please?
Yeah. I mean, I think when we think about the representations just on television, we think Big Bang Theory and those kinds of shows, right? Where it's a joke, someone's potential neurodiversity. So we are steeped in it, and we talk about this. We talked about this in the proposal. I don't know if it made it in the book, but this idea that that there's a little bit of leeway for professors to be a little quote unquote wacky, right? But because we're brain people, right? So but there's a line somewhere where people are like, okay, well, that's wacky enough, or that's not, that's beyond the pale of what we'll accept based on whatever our yes, Sarah said, Margaret Price, yes. So that is part of the issue, that we see these folks in popular media as kind of jokes or the butts of jokes, as opposed to people who have feelings and and desires to move through the world in a safe space. So I think we talk a lot in the book about, we've got a section on stigmas specifically, and then a section on masking specifically, but also on kind of some of the higher ed structures that lead to some of this. But I think stereotyping would have been an interesting thing to go into a little bit more.
Mm.
Well, and there's the flip side of that as well, because there's the way autism has often been portrayed in popular media, but then other ones, I mean, ADHD has kind of been treated as a joke as well. But then, you know, we have contributors of PTSD, and that's typically in the drama category.
Yeah.
Where then it's like, well, how, you know, how does that then impact? And I'm, you know, I can't speak, but I can imagine that there would be added like, oh, well, now do we need to walk on eggshells because we've seen, you know, we saw the movie where the PTSD soldier goes, you know,
Mhm.
and all those kinds of things. So there's a lot of, you know, again, there's a lot of conversations, because you know, I noticed early on when you're asking about what can institutions do, and you know, everyone is different in terms of how they experience their neurodivergence. And this is I'm going to plug my dormant podcast, All the Things ADHD, and often the whole point of it was Amy and I basically saying, yeah, my experience is completely different, and what works for you would be my absolute nightmare, right? Like that is basically every single episode of that show. And so again, like to be able to make, you know, there's a danger in looking at stereotypes. There's also a danger in just reading one story, right? The danger of one story. And that's another thing that we wanted to do with this book, is to present a multiplicity of stories, to be able to say there's not one autism narrative, there's not one ADHD narrative, there's not one PTSD, you know, whatever it is, there's not one narrative. There is a multiplicity of them. Here is a sampling. But ultimately, you know, everybody has their own experience and their own manifestation of it.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm seeing a lot of that in the chat. We have so many questions, and I want to make sure we get a chance for everybody. And I'm trying to put a couple of the questions together so that we can get as much coverage as possible. Kayla Simino, and Kayla, I hope I haven't totally destroyed your name, writes from the online learning side. She says, a lot of the strategies I often hear discussed to support neurodiversity take a lot of time. Preparing agendas, taking and sharing notes, establishing and maintaining connections. How do we balance the rapid, accelerating pace of our work, something we feel strongly as staff supporting online learning, with the need to slow down, to make space, to build community, and strengthen neurodiverse friendly strategies?
Yeah. Well, and and again, I'm thinking of from a UDL or a full accessibility perspective, right? That's an issue that we all have, right? I mean, I study burnout on the other side of my house, and you know, a lot of that is workload, moving too fast. There's just the expectations, the constant expectation escalation for academics, that you have to do something bigger the next time you do it, right? So there's these constant expectations and these constant assessments with your peers. So it's an issue that we need to deal with as a big group, as well as thinking about this particular population of our colleagues as well. How do we slow down the pace of higher education a little bit? How do we make time for these things? And in some ways, you have to prioritize and make time for the things that are important to you. And if slowing down and really making space for these kinds of things is important, then it's going to benefit everyone that's involved in that meeting or whatever it is that you're spending that extra time on. So I think a lot of the things that we talk about for supporting neurodivergent or folks with mental health issues in the book are ways of thinking about what we do next, right? How do we understand this story? How do we understand what people are doing? And there are times that we need to choose to go slow, and we need to do that more often.
Thank you. There's another curb cut principle. Oh, I'm sorry if that term is bizarre, if you haven't seen it before. The idea is that for on streets to take a curb and to cut it to make a ramp for people who have motion disabilities, people who are in wheelchairs or walkers or canes, for example. And people speak about this as a metaphor because that ramp, instead of that break in the curb, is an advantage to everybody people on bikes, people with shopping carts, and so on. So people often describe that when you make effort to do one step in favor of helping people with disability, it can benefit everyone. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that before. We have some really moving comments back from people in the chat in response to what you just said, Rebecca. Joseph Kostansek says he really wants to be in his own small niche, to do his job, to do it well. He can't handle the overwhelming nature of ambition. That's something we should make space for. Thank you, Joseph. And Carolyn Coward, a woman after my own heart, points out that chat disabled prevents at least 1/3 of your attendees from participating in online meeting. Tom Tobin, that's one of my pet peeves. I want to pull out some questions from the Q&A box, because if the chat box has been on fire, the Q&A box has been exploding. This is one from Sarah Silverman, who has a Substack that I'm just finding out right now, which looks really, really good. And she says this: I believe in Shannon Palma's chapter in the book, there is a discussion of top-down versus bottom-up processing, or general to specific versus specific to general. This matches my experience as an autistic person. I'm curious whether you have any thoughts about how this affects the faculty or staff experience. Thank you, Sarah.
It's really interesting, I think, because when we spend a lot of time in the book not making suggestions, I think, in a lot of ways, right? It was like the first step was to tell the stories and to let people explain their experiences so that we can think about those things, like Sarah's question, so we can think about the processing issue. And Lee and I just did a podcast episode with Shannon where she talks about her experience too. So you can find that on the Agile Academic as she talks about that bit of her experience. Lee, do you want to pick that one up at all?
Yeah, I think that it's you know, it really was hard to get into the weeds, because it was like, so everybody will find something that resonates with them, but the stories, there are some threads that connect them all, and they're also very dispersed and diverse. And so it's hard to draw. We found it really difficult, or maybe I did, to draw conclusions from it other than ableism sucks. That was basically, I'm like, can I just write that as a conclusion? Ableism sucks. Like stop it. And then, but then those fine questions that you're getting, that you're posing, Sarah, is the kind of that would be more like, I would love to do surveys about that and seeing that kind of stuff and understanding that better from a faculty and staff perspective. And one thing I wrote about it in the conclusion was that in a lot of ways we seem to be overrepresented in higher education, and that higher education could be a trap for certain neurodiverse folks, because there's clear guidelines at a certain point, right? Do these things and get your PhD. Do these things and you will get tenure. Do these, and so there's clear rules to follow. It allows you to hyper focus. It's all the, I see people nodding around. Like there are some things that are very attractive to a certain kind of neurodiverse person, right? And so it'd be interesting to see, just on a more macro rather than micro level, what are the experiences of neurodiverse faculty and staff in higher education writ large, and then being able to tease that out to be able to make more pointed recommendations. But it was really difficult for us, also because we're experts in this insofar as that we experienced it ourselves and have, learned about UDL and inclusive pedagogy and our own diagnoses. But neither of us are psychologists or psychiatrists. Neither of us are, especially trained in these kinds of things. And so that also becomes a difficult thing, whereas it's like, again, the stories represent a slice of the neurodivergent perspectives, and hesitate to draw any large conclusions other than ableism sucks from that. So
Oh, this is so interesting. And I'm happy to adopt that as a slogan for today's meeting.
Mhm.
We perhaps in response to that, Lee, is a comment from Laurel Whistler, and she says that what's tough is when neurodivergent employees request reasonable accommodations without disclosing. And the administrative response is skepticism as if they're trying to shirk. But to disclose is problematic as well. An audit of institutional guidance and language around inclusivity could be helpful in raising awareness.
Hmm.
What do you two think about that? I'm just constantly pressing you on what we should do.
My podcast co-host Amy Morrison, and I'll find it and put it in the chat, wrote an entire essay about this.
Mhm.
That we always joked about, and it has 350 references, and she never finally got around to writing it. But it literally is her story of trying to seek accommodations, and the idea of disclosure, and the idea of even diagnosis,
Mhm.
right? And that even being able to be diagnosed is in a lot of ways a privilege,
Yeah, it's
right?
expensive.
To have that insurance, it is very expensive. Even, and when she got it in Canada and had to pay for it out of pocket, because they were like, well, you're fine, so we're not gonna do this. You've made it this far, as probably many of us who had late diagnoses have heard, right? And that doubt around it. And so there's that, and that's why, again, this idea, I'll go back to what I said initially about this idea of the institution itself. Like, that's an institutional response,
Mm, right,
right?
right.
Is, yes, there's policy, but like, we don't want to give you more than you deserve, or like that's a kind of that's a very institutional, that's a very businessy response. And so we change the language, and making things more inclusive. It, it it's changing people's minds, right? Like that, and that is the language that we use, and we could change people's minds that way. But it's tricky, right? With invisible disability, and the politics of disclosure, and the politics of, like I said, even the diagnoses. Another conclusion would be like, wow, isn't everyone in this book really lucky that we all had good health care because we worked for higher education, right? And so had access to the insurance that we needed to be able to get these diagnoses.
But that's not true of everybody in higher education.
That's not true of everybody in higher education or the population writ large.
Definitely. Thank you. And thank you for the question. Um, I'm so grateful for everybody here who is sharing a lot, including their ideas and their personal experiences. Annie Bellinger shared a hiring process for libraries, which is a really, really good link there. We have another question from Tom Tobin, who has a spectacular amount of facial hair, by the way. It should be a role model for everybody on that. And this is something which we've been addressing today, but I want to give you a chance to take it a little further. He says this: I've attended many, many webinars and seminars about how institutions can support neurodiverse employees. I have yet to attend one that talks to a neurodiverse audience about how they can effectively engage with their neurotypical colleagues. So, how the neurodiverse staff can talk to their neurotypical colleagues. Rebecca and Lee, any ideas for how we might advocate for this from within?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I mean, I'm thinking about the essays, and I'm thinking of one essay and where the author talks about, trying to advocate for more representation across campus, try to start an ERG, and then like kind of no one showed up, and, those kinds of things. So there are people that who want to build the community to start having those conversations, to make that inclusive language in so many of our institutions' missions actualized for this particular population, right? So how do we make sure that folks can find each other and build community so that they feel some level of psychological safety to be able to maybe act as a unit or act as a group and bring that to a larger thing. And I would consider, if those folks can organize, going through your Center for Teaching and Learning or your Center for Faculty Excellence and having that potentially be a workshop, right? Or even recommending that to the folks at your Center for Faculty Excellence, if you have something in that direction, just to make that, to see if that's a thing that we can make happen. I think it's going to depend on each kind of institutional community who's willing to have those conversations openly.
Yeah. And I think you also need to think of the culture of the institution at large, right? Where if people aren't showing up, is that because they're not interested or because they're afraid? Right? And you can try to create a small space as much as you want, but if the larger institution is such that people don't feel safe going, if somebody sees me going to this meeting, if somebody hears about this meeting, will there be backlash, right? Will there be some sort of impact that it has? But again, like you could almost Trojan horse it, like you were talking about. We're going to talk about neurodivergent students, and then through that, it was a lot of neurodivergent faculty came out to that. We did a workshop on it was great. We did a workshop on inclusive pedagogy for neurodivergence by creating fidget boxes. And so we had this giant crate of various fidgets, and then we all made a box. Like we had cardboard. We made literally a cardboard box, and then we all went around during the workshop making fidget boxes. And it ended up, again, attracting a lot of neurodivergent faculty and staff that might not have shown up to an event for neurodivergent faculty and staff, but we're showing up for the students. Again, it's that idea, if we're showing up for the students, then it's okay. But if we're showing up for ourselves, that's, it goes back to that original why students and not faculty and staff. So again, if there's a way to kind of Trojan horse it, and let me tell you, that was like the most fun workshop we did, was this fidget workshop. And I have this beautiful fidget box, and we were all just like, but also sharing our favorite fidgets and sharing our own strategies to minimize distraction for ourselves from the students in a teaching or in a classroom environment. How, so again, that there's that idea of creating a way to connect that is safer, and then from that, what can we spin out from it? But I also see Jennifer has patiently had her hand up for a while, so I'll stop talking.
She has. And Jennifer, is it D'Amico or Demitsko?
It's D'Amico. Thank you.
D'Amico. Thank you.
One of the things that I've been talking about with colleagues recently is in organizations, we see that individuals with disabilities, individuals who are neurodiverse, often are the ones that the organizations put the burden on of advocating for themselves, right? And so as much as I could see value in having conversations and structures to talk about how to do that well, because it is sort of the default, I also have this question in my mind about the burden that places on people who are already existing in a state that is a burden to them because it doesn't meet their needs, it doesn't accommodate them, it doesn't recognize them, and that work that we then have to do is very much structured in a way that is antithetical to what we're best at doing. Like, getting an accommodation is a really hard and complex thing, and that can be really challenging for someone who is neurodiverse or very sick, or et cetera, right? So I'm really interested in this conversation about how we best advocate for ourselves. And I want to be really careful, like, it's not a monolith, right? Everybody's needs are different, but how we come together as a group to do that without further placing or shifting the discourse for organizations away from their responsibilities to meet us where we are.
I think that was one of the goals that came out from the book, and thinking about the book and putting the book together, is that a book like this, I hope, does some of that work, right? Where it is like, here are people who very graciously shared their stories on paper, right? There's still something really powerful about the print, right? And here is a book for you to read, to better understand these, and to sit with your discomfort by yourself, right? In that way.
Yeah.
So that, again, the work doesn't fall on you or the neurodiverse and disability crowd. The work is going to be for you to do. Right. And so, it's not a perfect response, but I think the more resources and the more things we have available, like our collection, I think goes a long way to help disperse the burden. It doesn't solve it, right? It clearly doesn't solve it, but there's something about, take this book home and read it.
This is she.
Can I get you to verify your birth date for me?
Cheryl, you
Sorry,
shouldn't
Cheryl.
do it yourself. There we go.
So it's okay. It's okay. Jennifer, thank you. Thank you for joining us.
Did you have anything to add to that, Rebecca? I don't know if I did that.
No, I think that was a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. And a great question. Friends, we're coming up in the last 5 minutes of our time together, which seems outrageous because this is such a deep topic, and we are diving into it from multiple locations. And we have some more questions and comments here. And one is from a anonymous participant who says, "I'd love to know what my neurodivergent colleagues look for when interviewing for new jobs as they attempt to gauge the authentic receptivity of a potential new supervisor to a prospective neurodivergent employee. How to see past the lip service." So
It's work that needs to be done, right? I think that we hope that the collection starts conversations like that. How do we make sure that we're being more open in hiring practices, that we're being less ableist in our community practices and our policy practices, right? So it's the book doesn't have the answer to that question. I think that's a lot of the questions that we're getting today are like the next step questions, which are excellent, right? It's like, what do we do next that moves us forward, right? Our hope with the collection was that it started a lot of these conversations, that it made people uncomfortable that needed to be made uncomfortable, and that it made people feel seen that needed to be seen. And we take steps from there. And I think a lot of these questions that are coming up today are those next steps that we want to be taking.
good.
I also think particularly in job interviews, I think even people who aren't neurodiverse, in a lot of cases, we're all kind of wearing a mask, right? In those job interviews, right? We want to be impartial and neutral. And the people who aren't wearing the masks are like, oh, wow, you really don't care what anybody thinks about you. But like most of us, both on the hiring committee side and on the interviewee side, even if you're not neurodiverse, you've got a certain mask on when you're interviewing, right? And I can remember it being even to be on the question asking side, that it was exhausting, right? Because there is a certain mask, again, of professionalism, but also neutrality and openness, but also so like the hiring process is just such a, even in the best of circumstances, such a fraught space. And as some of you were sharing, like the unprofessionalism or the the lack of care that often goes into these things too, so it's another one of those complicated issues where what happens in a space where literally everyone is wearing a mask of some sort.
We've had a lot of comments about hiring in the chat. Tony Sindelar makes the sobering observation that a lot of hiring is just awful, and he was wondering if, in part, we're seeing more competition for fewer spaces, and if that is exerting more pressure to make these more challenging. We have 1 minute left, and I'd like to take the moderator's privilege to ask a question, a speculative question for our guests, which is, if we could just press fast forward a little bit and imagine what, say 5 years from now, what might a college and university look like that takes this seriously, that really cares for its neurodivergent students, but also for its neurodivergent faculty and staff? What might such an institution seem like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think that it's a space where everyone feels like they can show up as they are, right? So, and that they don't feel like the pace is outpacing them of the work that they have, that psychological safety support in their communities. They have folks that they can talk to, but they can also live in that space where they're comfortable with the work that they're doing constantly. And the leadership is really sensitive to those issues and to supporting everyone with what we need to be successful.
It's both louder and quieter
Mm,
and more chaotic and more organized and both faster and slower all at once, right? Like it's well, like imagine, and I again, I asked this in my conclusion, maybe it was in my intro, I don't remember, but like the institution isn't ready for all of us to take off our masks, right? For all of us to just drop our masks and just be like, weehoo, let's go. You know, I think society's not ready for that either. Yeah, but like particularly our institutions, but like, you know, it really is, you know, for me being louder and faster and a little more hyper and a little more intense, which would be completely off-putting to some of my other colleagues who wanted to be more quiet, to be slower, to be less intense in the way that I am, you know. And so like you would have these paradoxes in this institution. I mean, to me, it sounds like it sounds absolutely marvelous, right? But it would be this cacophonous and dissonant space where all of these things somehow would coexist, right? And it'd be really cool. I don't I don't know if it's a sustainable model.
Well, it sounds like it would make room for all kinds of people, which is a theme that has come up in the chat. But I want to thank two kinds of people: my Rebecca Pope-Ruark person and my Lee Skallerup Bessette person, for being fantastic guests. We're past the top of the hour and we need to wrap things up. So first, I want to thank the two of you for being great guests. In the chat, I asked, you know, what can we do to better support neurodivergent people? And someone said, well, bring Lee back every week.
yeah, I agree.
I would say definitely bring Rebecca back every week as well.
Definitely.
What are the best ways for people to keep up with you all right now? Rebecca, what's the best way for people to keep up with your steady flow of books and consulting?
Yeah, LinkedIn's the best place to find me. So go ahead and
Very good.
On LinkedIn right now.
Very good. And Lee, where is the locus of your work now? Is it Ready Writing?
Not really. I would say LinkedIn is LinkedIn and Blue Sky.
Okay.
So I'm the only Lee Skallerup Bessette on LinkedIn, and I'm ready. I managed to snag Ready Writing on Blue Sky early on, so I'm at least on brand still for that. I'm still noodling about my digital footprint and digital personal site and all that kind of stuff.
That's going to be your next book, I think. And speaking of books, please make sure your library snags a copy of this excellent book, or you grab a copy yourself. And let me thank everybody who came here, all of you, dozens and dozens of people who had so many good questions, so many good ideas, bravely volunteered so much of your own life and experience. It's just been a real pleasure. Let me just wrap things up by saying we have a whole bunch of sessions coming up over the next couple of months on a wide range of topics. If you'd like to see the list, just go to the forum website, forum.futureofeducation.us. If you'd like to take a look at previous sessions, we have an archive on YouTube with nearly 450 recordings. You can get there from the website as well. In the meantime, thank you everybody for thinking and sharing together. This has been a terrific conversation. As the fall semester starts up here in the Northern Hemisphere, I hope everybody is safe and sound. Take care, everyone. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.